Hi everybody, happy Friday. It's the end of the week and we are going into a very cold weekend. So it'll be nice to be at home with your latest latest knitting project. So this is called Finish It Fridays. So I will be here every Friday during the month of February at 3 p.m. live if you wish to join me and see what is on my needles and what is hopefully off my needles, because as we know, February every year is called Finish It February. So it's the month that we focus on finishing our works in progress, any UFOs, unfinished objects that might be lurking in the shadows that you can find around the house, and that just gives us a good feeling for starting the new year and hopefully feeling a little bit less guilty when we get distracted by beautiful yarns and we want to cast those on. So I'm going to show you what I'm working on. It's just to provide you with a little bit of inspiration and a little bit of knitting chatter. Feel free to post in the comments what you're working on, what you're hoping to finish this month, what you have finished, whatever you feel like. Let us know where you're watching us from. And I have a very, very old UFO that I will show you near the end of this edition. So first up on my table here, this was my New Year, not Chinese New Year, which was celebrated yesterday, but January 1st New Year. This was my cast-on project, and as you can see, it is going to be a sock, a beautiful sock. I'll bring it up to the camera to show you. And it is knit in Opal Magic Sky, which is a self-striping blend of wool and nylon with a lurex thread going through it. So it creates these little twinkling stars as you knit. And I really don't like doing just regular stocking stitch in my socks when I have a beautiful self-striping yarn. I mean, that is beautiful just to see the yarn and the colors working up, but I like to play with the stripes. So I'm doing what I call a diagonal rib, and that creates a little bit more interest. It also needs to be blocked and really stretched out. So I'll bring that up to the camera so you can see it a little bit closer. Hi Andrea, thanks for joining. I dropped my zing needles. And hi Liz, and hi Selena. Selena was just here picking up some new projects too. So hopefully she has some whips to finish in February. So there you can see it is a diagonal rib. I like to do my socks from the top down with a slip stitch heel to reinforce it. And I haven't worked out the pattern yet. I write it down as I go, but I will have the pattern ready hopefully in the next week or two. But it has some pretty shades in it. Oh, it actually matches what I'm wearing today too. So it's got that beautiful denim blue and a pretty taupe ivory color and a dark indigo blue for the evening sky, and then a medium green, and it just has that really pretty glitter effect. So there you can see, instead of just getting straight boring old stripes, I have a little bit more interest. Your eye is drawn to the diagonal stitches as well as the horizontal stitches. So these are knit with a 100-gram ball, fingering weight sock yarn. I'm using my zing needles, size 2.75 millimeter. I know some of you like to knit your socks with 2.5 millimeter or 2.25 millimeter. Just depends on your own personal tension. If you're a loose knitter, 2.25 is perfect. And if you're a tight knitter, like I am with socks, then I stick to a 2.75. And I do really like the Opal yarn company, which is based in Germany. What's special about their yarns is that the yarn is completely milled on site in a family-run facility. So that means there's no offshore manufacturing. They dye the yarn, they spin the yarn, they ball the yarn, and they label the yarn, all on the same premise. And then it is shipped worldwide to pretty much all the major countries. It's been around for quite a while. Magic Sky, the one with the glitter thread, is a newer version. They do have some other colors in this lineup of Magic Sky, but I thought this one seemed to show the prettiest shades, similar to an evening sky. Can you see the twinkle in there? So it is the only color that I keep in stock, the blue mixture. It's also great if you're doing the Alaska hat. I've mentioned it before. It's great for the sky behind the charcoal shadowy trees. And 100-gram ball has probably about 420 meters. Most of them do. Better double check. 425 meters. So you'll get any size adult pair of socks, and you probably have enough left over for maybe a baby pair or to put towards another project. So that is my WIP number 1. It's a nice project to work on when I'm watching TV or if I'm doing a Zoom social chit chat with somebody, because I can knit without really looking at the pattern, and because I'm knitting in the round, I don't have to worry as much about dropping stitches. So it's a good fill-in project. I wouldn't want to do more than one pair of socks at one time, because I find they get a little bit tedious after a while. And I do have my limit. I will never have more than 3 projects on the go at one time. I have a customer who has an even stricter rule. She'll have 3 projects on the go, but that includes reading a book, knitting, sewing, quilting. So my rule is just 3 knitting projects on the go. That way I can get away with a few books on the side. Hi Wendy. Yes, that color is perfect for the Alaska hat, and I know a few of you are using it for that particular pattern. So I'd love to see a picture of how it turns out. Hi Joanne. Hi Deborah. Oh, Deborah's hoping to finish that simple adult sweater this month. Yes, did everyone see the post yesterday or the day before of Super Sandy? She has finished her version of that simple adult sweater, and it just fits her perfectly. She was knitting it since Christmas time, or she might have done it for her New Year's Day cast on. So she's knitted up very, very quickly. Her stitches are just beautiful, and the blocking is gorgeous, and she shortened the sleeves to fit her length of sleeve. It's just gorgeous. So if you have a chance, look at that post. It is probably 2 or 3 posts back on our Facebook page. Hi Nancy. What vest do I have on? Thank you. This is a very, very old one, probably knit about 8 to 10 years ago. It was an old Sirdar pattern. I know it's not available anymore, but I do love the warmth of it. It is just gorgeous. It's llama and silk, and it hangs really nice, got beautiful drape, and it also has A-line shaping. And then there are some cables, and I had to pick up stitches to do the front borders and make a little buttonhole and a nice shawl collar. So if I ever do find the pattern again in my files or notes, I will be sure to save it for you, Nancy. Hi Cindy. Hope you're having a great day watching all the birds gathering at the bird feeder. Yes, Sharon says Sandy's sweater was stunning. Really it is. It's a similar color to this, a little bit deeper tone. She used the llama natural worsted, which is our undyed combination worsted weight wool of llama and merino. She loved knitting with it. Who knows, she might even make a second one in a different color one day. Let's encourage her. Okay, so my work in progress number 2, for those of you who are not familiar with knitting lingo, WIP, W-I-P, stands for work in progress. UFO stands for unfinished objects, so that can be anything that's knit, crocheted, quilted, needle felted, anything that you work with and make with your hands. So you have seen part of my WIP during our last knit along in January. This is called the Blendin Woods cardigan, and I've made some progress. Slow but surely, I have worked up the back and one front. I have joined it at the shoulders, and I've joined up the sides. I just like to get, a little bit of motivation. So if I can see it coming together partially, then that keeps me going throughout the month. And I have finished one of the sleeves, which is a beautiful shape at the top. This is what we call a set-in sleeve. I'll bring it up closer to the camera so you can see. So it's basically just knit 2, purl 2 ribbing for all the borders. And then the main pattern stitch is called the Honeycomb Cable, which looks just like a honeycomb in a beehive, and it will really, really stretch out. Some of you who are knitting this sweater may be worried that it looks very narrow, but you have to remember that blocking will give you a lot of positive ease. So I have one sleeve completed, one front, one back, and a partial sleeve that I started last night. So the pattern, of course, is asking me to do the back and then the 2 fronts and then the sleeves. But I took a little detour, and I wanted to have something that I didn't need to concentrate as closely on, and the fronts have a lot of cables going on. So I thought I would finish the sleeves first. I really enjoy knitting the honeycomb cable pattern, and then I'll go back and do the last front. And then my final step is to pick up and do a huge shawl collar border. So I'll bring up the front and the back so you can see the detail. So we've got 1, 2, 3 different cable patterns happening at one time on the fronts, and there are A-line shaping in the form of decreases placed in each front and also in the lower back. It's going to be a very lightweight cardigan. The yarn is much lighter than it actually looks with the cable work. Cable work always makes your knitting look a bit denser. And the yarn that I've been using is the beautiful Echo Tweed DK, which is all natural. It is dyed, but it is produced in an organic manner, and it is a combination of alpaca, merino, and lyocell, which is like mondal, which you might have in some of your t-shirts and summer dresses and skirts. It's a man-made fiber, but it is derived from wood pulp, so it feels a lot like bamboo. So that's my progress there. This is one that I'm not really in a hurry to complete. I haven't given myself any deadlines for it. It would be nice to have it done for end of March or April, but I'm just enjoying working with the pattern and the yarn, so sometimes I just don't want it to end. Do you have any projects like that? You just wish that it would never end, like reading a good book? Hi, Evelyn. Hi, Zelda. Hi, Jennifer. Hi, Hetty. I know some of you are still working on your cardi-cal, so it was nice the way that January was termed Selfish Knitting Month in the knitting world, and then it transitions perfectly into Finish It February, March is generally known as Make It March, so that means we start new projects, hopefully for the spring and the summer. And in some areas of the world, March is also known as Malabrigo March, and that is a particular yarn company. Malabrigo is a hand-dyed yarn. You can get it in fingering weight, DK, worsted, chunky, super bulky, but it is superwash merino. It's a beautiful yarn. So some knitting groups like to have Malabrigo March, and they would do a knit along specifically for that particular yarn. Okay, so now I'm going to show you project number 3. This is a work in progress. And this is another very relaxing one. I don't know if you can see it from there. I will bring it up closer. So this is going to be a blanket for a special little girl, hopefully for her birthday, which is in June. But again, I'm not putting any deadlines on myself. If I get it done at Christmas, that's perfectly fine, or for back to school. This was just a way for me to use up all my small leftover balls of fingering weight or sock weight yarns. Because generally for every pair of socks you knit, you're going to have about 10 to 20 grams left over, and it's such a shame to have these balls just sitting around unused. So this is crochet, which still falls into the category of Finish It February. And I'm basically just working with pretty colors, little girl colors, but I really don't have any plan in mind. I'm not going to repeat the colors in any particular order, and I'm not doing a fade. A fade is generally where you work all the different greens and then all the different blues, and then you go lighter and lighter and lighter. So I'm not really doing anything on purpose. I'm just letting it happen on its own. So this is called the Granny Stripe Blanket. It is a pattern that you'll see quite often on Instagram, on Ravelry, and in Facebook groups, if you follow any of the crochet groups. And it is a take on the traditional granny square blanket, which many of us have had in our rec rooms in the 1970s, 1980s, maybe the 1990s. Traditionally, a granny square blanket was created by crocheting each square from the center out in the same pattern stitch, and then joining all the different squares together. And a lot of the times there were black borders worked around the squares, and then also a black border around the outside of the blanket. So this is a little bit more contemporary take on the old style granny square blanket. And basically all you're doing is you're creating a chain. So you're crocheting a chain of however many you want to get the width. I did about 220, and I think my width is going to be, if I use myself as a ruler, yeah, I'd say it's just about 5 feet. So that's kind of what I wanted for a little girl, and it will hopefully grow with her through the years. And then you're just basically doing 3 double crochets in every third chain along your base row, and then you chain 3, turn, and you do 3 double crochets in every little space. So the spaces are the gaps between the cluster of 3 stitches. It's very, very simple. I'm using a 4mm crochet hook. There is a pattern, of course. I will link it in the comments below if you want to read up on it. And any fingering weight works. So we have little mini balls of opal sock yarn. I started with a couple of those, and these will give you 42 meters or 10 grams. And basically I'm going across one way, and then I'm coming back so that all my ends end up on one side. And I'm really not worried about sewing in those ends because I'm going to do a border around the whole blanket. And if you do crochet, you'll know that you can easily crochet over the ends, and that works them in instead of sewing them in. Unlike knitting. Knitting, we can't knit over top of our ends, but that's a special thing about crochet. It's easy to work them in. And I think probably every 6 inches or so, I'm going to work a couple of rows of the Super Kid mohair with silk, which is also fingering weight. I've got some leftover amounts of cream, pale blue, pale aqua, pale pink. So I may just do the cream each time, or I may bring in some more colors. It's so visual, you kind of have to let it develop as you're working up along it. So yeah, my first love was crochet. I learned how to use a hook when I was in grade school, and that was what I just loved to do. I learned how to knit after that, and then I realized that there were a lot more patterns available for knitting, and crochet just kind of fell a bit to the wayside for me, so I'm really happy to be doing it again. This would be a great one for you to do, Sharon, for one of the grandkids. Oh, hi Elizabeth, good afternoon. You're working on your Mary Shen cardigan. Did you decide to go to the sleeves and just work up in the stocking stitch to get used to the pattern? Okay, so that is what I'm doing with all my bits and pieces. Behind me we have all the mini skeins from Richard DeVries. These are hand-dyed, beautiful speckles, variegated, tonal. These are 25 yards, so a mini skein is also a good way to get a row of color in. If you don't have a lot of stash at home, you can always just buy little mini balls and get an assorted mix of colors and tones. Yeah, so Richard DeVries does hand dyeing in the fingering weight, and it's a high twist merino, so it's really nice to work with. And that is again on a 4mm crochet hook. So that brings me to some very deep diving I did in January as I was cleaning out cupboards. I unearthed an actual UFO, unfinished object. So that's what I'm going to show you next. Some of you have seen it before, but generally I just don't leave it out. I hide it away. So this is 3/4 of a sweater that I still have to complete, and I call it a UFO. It's not a whip, because a whip has to actually be still on your needles or on your hook, and it has to be something that is still in progress. When you put something away in a cupboard and don't look at it for a decade, it classifies as a UFO, don't you think? So it's a beautiful sweater. I feel very guilty that I never finished it, and I was so close. All I have left to do is one sleeve, finish the collar, and finish the cuff. This is called Rambling Rose Pullover by Alice Starmore. She is a very well-known British designer, and her style of design is always focused on stranding and ferrule. Can anybody guess how many colors are worked in this sweater? I'll let you have a closer look. So it is worked from a chart, and every single row from ribbing into the ferrule section is worked with 2 colors at one time. You never get a break, and you never get to knit a solid row with one color. It's a very, very small needle. I think it was a 2.25mm for the ribbing, and a 2.75 or maybe a 3 millimeter for the main part. There are two distinct charted patterns that create the rambling rows. You can see here the ivy leaves, and then what looks like a rambling rose, or I think sometimes when I look at it, I see an onion ball. Keeps changing. The other beautiful thing about this sweater is the corrugated ribbing. So instead of doing a solid color ribbing, it's worked in 2 colors, and then about every 4 rows the colors change. And on the inside there are lots and lots of floats. It's a pure wool made in Scotland, and it is a fingering weight. And the other special thing about this sweater is that it's created with steeking. So right here should be an armhole, and that's where I would pick up the sleeve to knit down. But as you can see, it is worked in steek fashion, which is an old European technique in knitting. So there's actually no opening. I still have to cut that section and pick up the stitches there. I have already picked up the stitches on this sleeve, so I can show you what that looks like on the inside now that the steek has been cut. It's a very scary thing to do the first time. I would not recommend it to the faint of heart. Okay, so now we're looking at the inside of the sweater. So this has been cut right into the steek. The steek is where you're casting on extra stitches according to your pattern, and then you're working them in a salt and pepper stranding technique. That means whatever 2 colors you're working on that row, you have to knit stitch number 1 in the main color, stitch number 2 in the contrast, and repeat that for the steek stitches. And that will weave the 2 colors together. And then once you've cut the steek, you're just sort of basting it, folding it back as you would a salvage edge, and then basting it in place. It is very secure. In a pure wool, it tends to felt itself together, so it will not come undone. So yes, this pattern has steeking at the armholes, and it also has steeking around the neck. So I steeked, and I still have to pick up the stitches and then fold back the steek section and baste it into place. It just creates a little bit extra warmth when you have that second layer at the back. So yes, that makes it easier to knit overall. If you're steeking, that means you are constantly knitting in the round. After the ribbing, you're just knitting, no purling. And then when you get to the underarm area, you can continue knitting in the round. You don't have to stop and go back and forth to create a back and a front of the sweater, because you're just cutting with scissors, yeah, real scissors, straight through the steek, and then picking up along the edge. So you'll find steeking in many of the Norwegian patterns, Swedish patterns, and the Scottish patterns. Has anyone guessed how many colors are in this sweater yet? More than 7, Sandy. More than 12, Zelda. Oh, definitely more than 6. You're getting close. Yeah. So yes, I feel very, very guilty. I mean, I'm a very intentional knitter. I usually only start knitting something when I have a need to knit it, or a deadline, or a purpose. And this one I was going to knit for myself, and I started it about, I think it's over 15 years ago now. The sweaters back then were much bigger and fuller, and then they started to get smaller in design, so I felt like it would be too big for me. that could be the reason why I put it down and didn't finish it. But now, if you notice, the fashion is big. It's like the 1980s. Everything is oversized, big, puffy sleeves. So by the time I get this finished, it is back in fashion again. And the actual design is timeless and classic because it is fair out. So the pattern I've been following is called Rambling Rose Pullover. And this is my pattern, and I'm so happy that I can find the pattern. It was in a book of Alice Starmore designs, which you can probably get at the library now or at a bookstore. So here it's shown on a gentleman with a mullet. Just shows you how old the pattern is. And here's my list of colors. So there are 15 colors worked into this sweater. Some of the colors are very similar in tone to give it a gradient effect or a shaded effect. And yeah, so it was knit on 2 1/4 millimeter for the ribbings and 3 1/4 for the main part. And my circular needles are still in there, so everything is ready for me to just pick it up again. I was having a conversation with Super Sandy about finishing this sweater. You know, realistically, will I ever finish it, or have I lost my rhythm completely? And she suggested that I could always take out a sleeve and make it into a vest. I could just pick up stitches around the steek and knit the corrugated rib to match, because I certainly have lots of yarn left over. So that's an option, and I do have to finish the collar. Once I got going on the sleeve 15 years ago, or whenever I worked on it, it did go really quick. I think it took me a week and a half, and it was weather much like we have now, very cold, where you just want to stay inside, stay warm, and work on a project. So I have an idea of how long it will take me to finish it, but there just seems to be something more alluring that comes up in the meantime. So is anyone else an intentional knitter? Do you cast on just when you have a particular project in mind and you buy the yarn specifically for that project? Or are you the type of knitter who gets distracted by pretty shiny objects and you buy the yarn before you have a project in mind? It all works out in the end. It's just we have different methods to our madness. Oh, somebody guessed 22 colors. Well, there is a designer I know of, a British designer who's retired now. Some of you, I'm sure, have looked at his gorgeous geometric style pullovers. Cafe Facet. He uses pretty well no less than about 22 colors for each of his sweaters. And he does more the intarsia technique. So instead of stranding and knitting in the round and steeking, he'll knit the pieces separately, seam them together. But he likes to do geometric designs inspired by old china, pottery, old quilts. Yeah, he's just a true artist, and he has a lot of people who knit for him. He just basically has to make up the design, and then they envision it and turn it into a garment. So he has done many coats, full-length coats. He's done jackets, vests, pullovers. Yeah, if you have a chance to look him up, his name is spelled Kaffe, and his last name is Fassett. Quite inspiring to see the colors that he can pull together. Yeah, so those are all my whips and UFOs, and if you feel like sharing some of your photos of whips or UFOs, please feel free to in our event page. It's called Finish It Fridays, and there is a discussion thread. You just click on it and you can post whatever pictures you like. And I think Super Sandy posted her picture in there to get the ball rolling. So I will be back next Friday with more progress on my whips, and maybe I'll find another UFO or two that I have not located. Still missing in action. So I hope everyone stays warm this weekend if you're in the cold part of Ontario or Canada or the USA, and just get lots of knitting done. It just feels good to complete things. Thanks for watching, everyone.